So one thing I won't do as a consultant is to bore you with slides. So I have no slides actually to share. I'll probably take 10, 12 minutes to share some thoughts. And then I think we'll have some questions as part of the panel. So again, my name is Umair Hameed. I lead financial services advisory for KPMG. I've spent a lot of time here and in the US and in Europe. And I've worked a lot in strategy, operations, regulatory, and a lot in technology. And from my perspective, on one end of the spectrum, you have a big drive towards cashless, contactless, digital payments, mechanisms through which you can reduce friction, right? I mean, if you imagine a 100-dirham bill or wherever you've come from, your currency note, it starts its life in a bank, so it's in an ATM machine. Somehow it got credited to your account by way of salary or some payment. You withdraw that, and during the day, it keeps changing hands. And at the end of the day, theoretically, you should end up in a bank again, right? So if you've spent it, some retailer, somebody will deposit it back in a bank. And then it sleeps overnight, and the whole cycle repeats itself. But I think in this part of the world, the challenge we have is that for a transaction to happen electronically or non-cash basis, three factors that need to coexist. One is your ability to do the transaction, to pay for goods and services without cash. So that means you're carrying some sort of a card or some mechanism through which you could pay, which is not cash. The second is the retailer or the vendor accepting that mechanism, i.e. the way you are willing to pay is the same way the retailer is willing to accept. And third is having the infrastructure and awareness and knowledge for that transaction to take place. So to give you an example, you sit in a taxi and there is a point of sales terminal in the taxi, so you think I'm good to pay with my card. But then the taxi driver will tell you, I'm so sorry, but this machine actually doesn't work. And I'm sure some of you, I see some smiles, and I know some of you would have experienced it. So I actually did some more due diligence. So I asked a few of the taxi drivers, and after probing, you actually realize that the problem is not the machine. The problem is with the taxi driver. They actually don't know how to use the machine. That's the first thing. So they feel that they haven't been given enough training or awareness of how to make the machine work, and their fear of messing up, they'd rather just say it's not working, right? The second
doesn't want to pay taxes on it.
Yeah, so I'll come to that. So the second interesting thing is that they said, look, if you actually pay by card, then my probability of getting a tip actually diminishes. Because let's say you pay 61 dirhams, and the guy is assuming that if he pays cash, you're going to give him 65 and say, look, keep the change, right? He says, but with a card, there is no option for you to give me a tip or something, and you're going to pay the exact amount. So for me, it's better to say it's not working, so you pay me cash, and a few other reasons, right? And I found it so fascinating that in this part of the world, this is actually a reality, right? You know, it's an everyday reality. And you think, okay, if this is the reality in a taxi in Dubai, what is happening at the macro level in the country? And I myself actually spent a year working with one of the central banks in the region in developing their strategy for a multi-bank cash center. And what we realized was that in the GCC, usage of cash is actually projected to increase year on year 6% at least, right? Now, if you imagine 6%, I mean, that's a pretty considerable number. On one part, you see parts of the world moving towards more electronic and digital payment mechanisms. But in the GCC, you're actually seeing cash usage not stay steady, but actually increase. And the central bank, a number of central banks in the region are quite worried that what do we need to do to cope with this increase in cash usage? Some of our clients have said that, look, how do we reduce the number of transactions in our ATMs? How do we better manage the cash in our ATM machines? Just because there is such a hunger for cash, right? And it's coming back to those three factors that I was talking about. That you as a consumer, you're actually part of the 10 to 15% population of the GCC, which is actually banked. The remaining 85 to 90% is underbanked or non-banking today. So what that means is they actually cannot even get a digital or electronic payment mechanism, right? So, the majority of blue-collar workers, they're not even going to get a card of some kind, right? and because their salary levels and incomes are so low, that they're actually not going to have that much money to be transacting domestically. They'll just get their salary and remit it to wherever they come from. So there lies one challenge. The second is, from a government perspective, till the VAT didn't come out, the government really didn't care that much about the number of transactions that were happening in cash, right? Because it was the banks that were having to bear the cost of the infrastructure, etc. And there was no real incentive for the government to be keeping an eye out on what is being transacted cash versus electronic. But I think the VAT move will certainly have an impact in driving towards more electronic payments, because they create an audit trail, which historically didn't exist. And I think furthermore, there's a lot of potential in the region to move towards electronic payment, but at the same time, who takes responsibility for driving that infrastructure is a question. Is it the telco operators? Is it the banks? Is it the central bank? And is there a central body? And I don't think there is one cohort of organizations that say, look, we're consciously going to drive the economy or the society towards a cashless one. So I think till that doesn't happen, I stand with my original prediction that I don't think cash is going to go away, certainly till the next generation. And perhaps I think the generation after, my view is that by that time we should see more or less of it gone. But till then, I think cash is here to stay. There's a long way for us to go, and look forward to getting some questions. Thank you.